Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marianne Vanderduzen. I'm a professional artist and educator, and in this video, I will be walking you through 3 possible reasons as to why you could be stuck on a painting before providing you with some tips and tricks for how to overcome those barriers. The reason that I'm making this video is because so often I hear both on my Instagram and in my Facebook group and on YouTube that people are stuck on a painting and they just can't seem to move forward no matter how hard they try. Sometimes it's because they're really not sure of what to do next in their painting. Sometimes it's because they don't feel motivated. Sometimes it's because there just never seems to be enough time. So how is it that some artists seem to overcome these barriers while others get stuck and are unable to move forward? For me personally, the answer boils down to just one simple word. But before we do that, I do have to do the typical YouTube thing where I ask if you would be willing to subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and comment throughout if you have any questions whatsoever. Getting stuck on a painting is so common. We may start our work with the loftiest of intentions, but halfway through the process, we just want to abandon it, or we want to start it again, but we're lacking that little bit of oomph, that drive to get us into the process and into the flow again. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that I believe that all of this boils down to just one simple word, and that word is friction. When I'm talking about friction being applied to any task that needs doing, all I'm referring to are the internal and external factors that are working in opposition, preventing me from getting that task done. If we were to use the metaphor of a plane trying to take off from a runway, when you have too much friction in your studio practice, it quite simply means that you have more drag than thrust, meaning that you want to get that airplane off the runway and be soaring in the sky and be painting, but the power of thrust that you have isn't enough to overcome the drag factors that are pulling you back. Once I identified friction as being the reason that I'm just not getting things done, it became so much easier to be able to target it and come up with strategies to work around it. For example, sometimes the only time that I have available to go and work out at the gym is at 5 in the morning. But when that alarm goes off at 5 a.m., the desire to stay in bed and just turn it off is overwhelming. So to overcome that, on the mornings that I'll be setting my alarm for 5 a.m., I actually sleep in my gym clothes. Since I've made that one simple adjustment, I have actually never gone back to bed after my alarm has gone off. It is still so hard to drag myself out of bed at 5 in the morning, but it's infinitely easier than if I had to drag myself out of bed in the morning, get dressed, and then go to the gym. Similarly, we can look at applying that same mindset towards your studio practice to ensure that whenever you get stuck on a painting, you have the ability to eliminate any and all friction standing in your way. Now, in my experience, friction can take on 2 different forms. It can be external, which means that something outside of you is preventing you from getting into the studio. This could be time management, or perhaps you're lacking a certain skill that you would need in order to execute the task on your painting, and that's stopping you from going forward. But friction can also be internal. Now, when we're looking at internal friction, what I'm referring to are things such as perfectionism or fear that's preventing you from picking up the brush. There's absolutely nothing outside of you that's stopping you from painting. It's all up here. And the truth is that friction is equally valid. Both of those things can work against you, sometimes simultaneously, and prevent you from continuing to move forward in your craft. To that end, I have identified 3 possible sources of friction that we can look at reducing or eliminating outright that will allow you to move forward not only with your paintings, but also as an artist. So let's get started. The first reason that you could be stuck is due to perfectionism. How many of you have started a painting only to get stuck on one teeny tiny area that you are just obsessed with making perfect before you can move on to the rest of the painting? And trust me, I am not judging here because that's me. About 5 years ago, I was working on a landscape painting that featured a barn, and after I adjusted the barn and made a color correction on it, I full on broke into big, heavy, messy, ugly sobs because I thought it was too purple. But the reason I actually feel comfortable sharing this is because I think we've all been there. My hopes and expectations for this painting were here, but the reality was actually down here. And so as a result, because there was this gap, I didn't think that the painting was good enough. I thought that I was a terrible artist. I figured that if I continued on with the painting, I was just setting myself up for future disappointment. And so I really struggled with moving forward on this one. And that is due to a deep internal sense of perfectionism. I actually do want to talk a lot about perfectionism in upcoming videos, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much now. But over the past 5 years, I've been doing a lot of growing and reflecting on what it is that drives perfectionism and why we labor under this delusion that if we just do the right things, then the painting will be perfect. I'm not actually sure if a perfect painting exists. And something that I remind my students of all the time, not only through my videos, but also when I'm teaching in person, is that this whole notion of perfection seems to be very much a human concept. For example, when I'm looking at nature, some of the most beautiful, interesting trees are gnarled and covered in knots, and perhaps they've been hit by lightning, and so there's a part of the trunk that's split. They are beautiful in their imperfection. And if we were to paint a forest of perfect trees, it quite simply wouldn't look real. And so why is it that we as artists hold this ideal of perfectionism in our minds, that the painting has to be perfect, otherwise it can never be released? Perhaps it's how we're raised. Perhaps it all boils down to an education system that is really encouraging us to check all of the boxes and to get 100 out of 100 in order to get our nice pat on the head, as opposed to encouraging more growth, more creativity, more experimentation, more failure. In any case, at the crux of perfectionism is self-sabotage. How are you supposed to move forward and grow as an artist if the only thing that you want to do is create a work of art that's perfect? To that end, your perfectionism is full on holding you back. Imagine if artists such as Taylor Swift never actually released their albums because track 12 out of 13 wasn't quite up to their standards or expectations. So to overcome your perfectionism, remember this: the way forward is through. If you want to grow, you need to be willing to fail. So when you find yourself in those moments where you're stuck in on one small part of your painting, or you're afraid to release it to the public, I want you to remind yourself of these 3 words: progress over perfection. If you're trying to decide whether to hold back a painting because you don't think it's good enough or to release it to the world, always err on the side of release. Let the market decide, and then continue to move on and work on new pieces to help you continue to build that skill set. So that is friction point number 1. The second root cause of friction that I'm going to discuss is fear. Fear might manifest itself into phrases that you might be saying, such as, well, I don't want to work on this painting because what if I ruin it? What if I make this adjustment and it just doesn't work? So when you're running into fear as an artist, one of the things that I like to do is to actually lower the stakes. For example, if I'm working on a big, important painting and I'm running into a section where I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm not actually sure how I want to address this, then what I'll do is I'll pull out my sketchbook or I'll pull out a canvas board and I'll do a quick study there. That way I can experiment with different color mixes, different brushwork, any kind of technique or strategy that I want to try to employ. But if I mess up, who cares? There's no stakes here. If I fail, then the worst thing that will happen is that I'll be out a few hours of my time. But I still don't consider that time wasted. Instead, that time is an investment into figuring out the right strategy forward in a low stakes environment. I heard this really amazing phrase on Instagram the other day from Layla Hormozi, and she said that fear is a mile wide, but an inch deep. What you think is an ocean is actually a puddle. So if you're stuck because you're afraid that you might ruin a painting or that you might make an adjustment that's unsuccessful, the best thing you can do is to dive in, but dive in somewhere safe, where even if you make some mistakes, it's not going to matter at all. Once you've done something once, you know you can do it again. So build some confidence and some momentum by doing what you need to do in a low stakes environment where if you mess up, you mess up. But if you're successful, you'll know that you have what it takes to do that work on the painting itself. Finally, I'm going to talk about the source of friction that I believe is one of the most difficult to overcome, and that is the lack of motivation. How many of us have started a painting and we're feeling so good and so excited? We have this idea in our head. We can't wait to get the canvas, get the drawing on it, get painting. And then we might be a few hours in and we're going, oh, I don't know if this is exactly how I wanted it to go. This is hard. I'm tired. I don't have time. Abandon. I'm saying this because I do it too. When I first start a new painting, I am overwhelmed with excitement and joy and happiness. Like, woohoo, I'm starting a new painting. But after about 3 or 4 hours, that quickly wears off. I usually always underestimate how long it's going to take me to actually do a painting. Frequently, I'll estimate that it'll take me 15 to 20 hours to do something, only for it to take 30 or more. And then I'll quickly lose motivation because I'll put in a 3 or 4 hour painting session and it'll feel like I barely even made a dent on the painting. So how exactly do you overcome this lack of motivation when you have a painting that you need to finish, but you just don't feel like finishing it? The best thing, hands down, in dealing with a lack of motivation is discipline. Discipline is not terribly sexy. It's not something exciting. It's not something that we're all like, ooh, I can't wait to be more disciplined. So how does discipline play into your painting practice? Discipline is a commitment from your ideal self, the one saying, I want to complete all of these paintings, to your future self, the one that's saying, I don't really want to. And it's a commitment saying, I know you don't want to, but you will. Discipline is putting systems in place to override any of those feelings of not wanting to do something. That way, regardless of how you're feeling in that moment, those systems are going to take over and basically steamroll that future self, the one that doesn't want to do it, and force it into doing the thing. One of the best ways that I can commit to myself is by writing something down. What I like to do the day before is that I actually set up a block of time in which I will be painting. And that block of time is uninterruptible. I'm not allowed to schedule appointments during that time, and frequently I turn my phone completely off. By doing that, I'm making a promise to myself. I am promising myself that even if I don't feel like it, I'm still going to show up anyway. Other things that I like to do is I actually like to set up my entire workspace in advance the night before. That way, all I need to do is walk into my studio room, sit down, open up the paint, and I'm good to go. Sometimes not having a prepared workspace is enough friction to even overwhelm my discipline. Now, for those of you saying, I'm just not very disciplined, the good news is that discipline is a muscle. It can get stronger. The more times you keep your commitment to yourself, the easier it gets. So how do you build that muscle? Give yourself some small, easy wins. Again, to use the gym analogy, if you're going for the first time, you're not going to go and grab 50-pound weights and start doing bicep curls. Start with the lighter weights, the things that you know you can accomplish. And over time, you'll be able to strengthen that. And you'll know that when you set that commitment to yourself, you're going to follow through because you've built a history of evidence supporting that. I'm going to share another story, and this is how discipline actually helped me gain over 10,000 followers on Instagram. So a few months ago, I put into my agenda that I wanted to spend the evening in a local marsh and pick up some reference photos so that I could turn it into a sketchbook entry. That day actually wound up being super busy. So by the time the evening rolled around, I was exhausted and I definitely did not want to go to the marsh. But because I had already made the commitment in my planner and I have years worth of discipline muscle built up, I said, you know what? I've just got to go do this thing. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I went out to the marsh. It turned out to be a beautiful night. And the painting that I was able to make as a result turned out great. If you're interested, this wave painting is actually available on YouTube as a full tutorial, but this one I just made for practice. Now, when the time actually came for me to paint this, I also didn't feel like doing it. The only time I had available to paint this thing was again at night. I have twin 5-year-old boys, and after they get put to bed, I'm absolutely exhausted. But I had a really strong feeling about this marsh painting, so again, what I did to overcome my friction was before the boys went to bed, I actually set up my full painting workspace, including taking the paint out of their tubes onto a wet palette, which meant that the second they were asleep, I could just head to the studio and work. As of the time of recording this YouTube video, the reel that I made as a result of creating this painting has over 900,000 views on Instagram and resulted in a surge of traffic to my profile. As a result, I gained over 10,000 followers, and all because I actually executed on something that I didn't want to do. If my lack of motivation had won that little battle that was taking place that night and on subsequent nights when I was trying to paint the marsh, then I never would have had the surge of traffic that I had. It's very rare that we actually do feel like doing something. In my ideal world, I would love to wake up every single day infused with this passion and desire to pick up the brush, but I don't. So whenever you're feeling stuck due to lack of motivation, give yourself an opportunity for a win. Perhaps that means that if you're not actually going to sit down and pound out a few hours of painting, maybe you take out your sketchbook and just do a quick little scribble in there. Perhaps you establish a practice of always setting up your workspace the day before. That way you know the next day everything's ready for you. Perhaps it's that you just commit to 20 minutes. That way, even if you're tired, even if you've had a busy day, anyone can do 20 minutes. And if you don't believe me, just look at your phone usage, because your phone will usually tell you exactly how you've been spending your spare time. And as your discipline muscle grows and becomes stronger, you'll notice that that friction of "I don't feel like it" becomes easier and easier to overcome. That doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. It just means that you'll be able to get enough momentum to overcome it. And discipline is hard. But what's also hard is seeing work that's just going unfinished because I didn't feel like doing it. So if you're struggling with a lack of motivation, give yourself some wins. Focus on your discipline and make a commitment to your future self that you are going to show up regardless of how you feel. Even if you write that exact sentence down in a journal or on a piece of paper, I am going to show up today regardless of how I feel about it. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I've also just released my first ever course called Painting Flowers in Acrylics. It's now available and linked in the description below. Keep making your life beautiful, and I'll see you in the next video.